Today is my 32nd birthday, and my husband is in the kitchen doing something he has never once done in 4 years of marriage: cooking. Not reheating leftovers, not ordering from DoorDash and pretending he made it, actually cooking. I can hear the pan sizzling from the bedroom, and when I peek around the doorframe, I see him standing at the counter with his back to me, wearing the ridiculous novelty apron his coworker gave him as a gag gift last Christmas. The one that says Grill Sergeant on the front. He's never taken it out of the gift bag until today. My husband. I'll call him by the nickname I gave him when we first started dating, which was Theo, short for Theodore, the name his late grandfather carried. Theo has always had two settings in the kitchen: absent and incompetent. He once called me from the grocery store to ask where we kept the olive oil. We live in a 900 square foot apartment. There are 4 cabinets. So the apron is already strange. The ambition is stranger. Go back to bed, he calls without turning around. It's a surprise. I smile and retreat to the bedroom, but something small and sharp catches in my chest on the way back. A splinter. I can't name it, so I ignore it the way you ignore a smoke detector with a dying battery. Annoying, distant, someone else's problem. I'm a forensic accountant. I have been for 7 years, first at a mid-sized firm in Columbus, and now as a senior investigator at a consulting group here in Cincinnati. My entire career is built on the premise that numbers don't lie, but people arrange them to look like they do. I notice patterns. I notice when something doesn't add up. It's not a skill I turn off when I walk through my own front door. And something about this morning doesn't add up. Theo is 35. He works in pharmaceutical sales, which means he drives a company car, takes clients to dinner on the company card, and talks about pipeline and Quill 4 targets at parties until people start looking for excuses to get another drink. He's charming. He's handsome in a forgettable, catalog model sort of way. He always knows what to say. We met at a fundraiser for a children's hospital. He bid on a weekend river cruise just to impress me, even though I later found out he'd already had 2 glasses of wine and wasn't entirely sure what he was bidding on. I thought it was spontaneous and romantic. Now I understand the difference between spontaneous and impulsive, and it is not a small difference. We dated for a year and a half, got engaged, and married quietly at a courthouse in March because neither of us wanted the fuss. My mother cried. His mother sent a card with a $20 bill inside, which I thought was either deeply sincere or deeply insulting, and still haven't decided which. But this morning, on my birthday, he is making me a smoothie. He announced it last night with this careful, practiced energy that I recognize now as the energy of a man who has rehearsed. He said he found a recipe, that it had mango and Greek yogurt and some kind of supplement powder that was supposed to be good for joint health. He said it like he'd been thinking about my joint health for months. I have never once had a problem with my joints. I sit on the edge of the bed and look at my hands. The splinter is still there. When I come out 20 minutes later, showered and dressed, the kitchen smells like fruit and something slightly chemical underneath it. The way a pharmacy smells, sweet on top, sterile beneath. The blender is already rinsed and in the dish rack. Theo is standing by the window with his phone, and the moment he hears me, he slides it into his pocket with a movement that is just fast enough to notice. "Happy birthday," he says, and his smile is enormous and immediate, like he'd been holding it ready. He hands me a glass. It's tall and pale orange, flecked with the dark seeds of something. It looks fine. It looks like a birthday smoothie. I need to grab the paper from downstairs, he says, already moving toward the door. Drink it while it's cold. We don't subscribe to a physical newspaper. I stand in the kitchen holding the glass and listen to the front door click shut behind him. I look at the smoothie. I look at the blender, which he rinsed but did not wash. There's a faint residue along the bottom seal that is slightly gray and powdery and does not look like mango or Greek yogurt or anything that belongs in a joint health supplement. I am a forensic accountant. I know what it looks like when someone cleans up, but not quite well enough. I take out my phone and photograph the residue in the blender. Then I take out a small Ziploc bag from the utility drawer. I keep them for evidence preservation at work, habit, and I scrape a sample of the residue into it with a butter knife. I seal it and put it in my coat pocket, which is hanging on the hook by the door. Then I pour the smoothie down the kitchen sink, rinse the glass, refill it with water and a splash of orange juice from the carton in the fridge, and walk to the living room couch, where I'm sitting with the glass in my hand and my phone in my lap when Theo comes back through the door 4 minutes later. No paper. Forgot they stopped Saturday delivery, he says, which is the worst lie I've ever heard from a man who is professionally paid to be persuasive. He looks at the glass in my hand with an expression that I would have read 6 months ago as affectionate attention. He sits beside me. He watches me, not the TV, not his phone. He is watching the glass. It's good, I say, really good. The mango. His whole body relaxes. Shoulders drop half an inch. Something leaves his face. Tension, I think, or anticipation, I'm not sure, and is replaced by something that looks almost like relief. That's when I know for certain. I don't scream. I don't shake. I have spent 7 years staring at fraudulent documents and understanding that the most important thing you can do when you realize you're looking at evidence of a crime is not react. Reacting contaminates the scene. Reacting tips off the subject. Reacting costs you everything. So I smile and I finish my fake smoothie and I tell him it was the best birthday breakfast I've ever had, and then I excuse myself to use the bathroom, where I sit on the closed toilet lid and allow myself exactly 90 seconds to fall apart before I pull myself back together and make a plan. The plan starts with my sister. My sister lives 40 minutes away in a suburb called Loveland. She's 2 years older than me, works as a high school chemistry teacher, and is one of the few people in the world I trust completely and without condition. I send her a text that says, "Something is wrong, don't call. I'll explain when I get there. Can I come over today?" She responds in 40 seconds with, "I'll make coffee." I spend the rest of the morning performing a birthday. I open the card Theo gives me. He spent money on it, which is new. It has a watercolor painting of the Cincinnati skyline on the front, and inside says something about another year of us. I eat the lunch he suggests, a restaurant we both like, and I talk about nothing, and I watch him. And I look for the seams. The seams are everywhere once you know to look. He checks his phone more than usual, not with the distracted thumb scroll of boredom, with the focused, purposeful attention of someone waiting for a specific notification. He orders a beer with lunch and barely touches it. He laughs at things that aren't funny and doesn't laugh at things that are. His timing is off by just enough that I start to understand he's been running a different script in his head all morning and our actual conversation keeps interrupting it. At 2 in the afternoon, I tell him I promised my sister I'd come by for a birthday coffee. He doesn't object. He kisses me on the cheek and tells me to have fun, and his hand on my shoulder is held there a beat too long, like he's trying to memorize something. I drive to my sister's house and sit at her kitchen table and tell her everything. The apron, the fake newspaper, the gray powder in the blender, the way he watched the glass, the sample in my coat pocket. My sister is quiet for a long time. "Do you still have a friend at the toxicology lab?" I ask her. "Her name is Dr. Petrov," my sister says. "She owes me a favor. The sample goes to Dr. Petrov by end of day. What I do next is what I am trained to do. I go home, and I go through our finances. I have full access to our joint accounts and have always been the one who manages them. Theo says numbers give him a headache, which I now understand was by design. I open the accounts and I start going back 6 months. The first anomaly is a series of cash withdrawals. Small, regular, always from ATMs in neighborhoods neither of us lives or works in. The kind of withdrawals that are meant to be invisible because individually they're unremarkable. But I am a forensic accountant and individually unremarkable is my entire specialty. Over 6 months he has withdrawn almost $14,000 in cash. The second anomaly is a life insurance policy I didn't know existed. I find it in his email. I've always had his password, we shared everything, or I believed we did, buried under a subject line that says Policy Documentation, Archer Financial. The policy was taken out 8 months ago. It covers my life. The payout is $2 million. The beneficiary is Theo. I photograph every page of the policy with my phone. I email the photos to an encrypted account I use for sensitive client documents. Then I sit in our home office in the dark for a while, listening to him watch television in the other room, and I allow myself to feel the full weight of it, the magnitude of the thing, before I set it down and return to the work. The third anomaly takes longer to find. I go back through his personal accounts, which I have viewed occasionally but never scrutinized, and I find the pattern of a second life. Dinners at restaurants we've never been to together, a hotel in Indianapolis 3 months ago, billed to his card. On a weekend he told me he was at a sales conference, a jewelry store in Newport, Kentucky. The amount is enough for something significant, a bracelet, a necklace, a ring. I am not wearing anything new. By the time I go to bed that night, I have a picture of the whole thing. The shape of it is not complicated, which is always the way with fraud. The scheme itself is rarely sophisticated. People just count on not being examined. Theo is in debt. His sales numbers have been declining for 2 years, a fact I now realize I dismissed at his explanation each time. The market, the territory, the new competitors, without ever looking at the underlying data myself. In addition to his declining income, he has been spending on someone else. The $14,000 in cash. The hotel, the jewelry, the life insurance policy was purchased 8 months ago, 6 weeks after he got a collection notice from a lender I didn't know about. I find the notice in a folder he'd mislabeled in our shared cloud storage as Tax Documents 2021. It is not a tax document. It is a demand for repayment of a personal loan for $52,000, taken out without my knowledge, now in default. $2 million solves that problem. $2 million also funds the next chapter of a life that does not include me. The next morning, Dr. Petrov calls my sister, who calls me. The powder in the blender contained traces of a compound called colchicine. It's a medication used to treat gout and certain inflammatory conditions, and in standard therapeutic doses, it is entirely safe. In a large enough dose, ingested all at once, it causes severe gastrointestinal damage, cardiac arrhythmia, and organ failure. The symptoms present gradually over 12 to 24 hours. At the dosage estimated from the residue, she says, it would be characterized clinically as acute poisoning and could very easily be attributed to a sudden illness in an otherwise healthy person. She says, whoever used this did their research. She says, are you okay? I tell her I am. I tell her I'll be in touch. I hang up and I sit in my car in the parking lot of a Kroger near my sister's house and I think about the word research. I think about Theo and his pharmaceutical background. I think about 8 months of planning. I think about the fact that he kissed me on the cheek yesterday and watched me raise a glass to my lips with the expression of a man, counting down. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't noticed the residue. I allow myself 2 minutes. Then I start making calls. The first call is to my company's legal counsel, a woman named Patricia who has helped me navigate evidence handling in corporate fraud cases and who I trust implicitly. I explain the situation in the careful, factual language of a professional, and she listens without interrupting. When I finish, she is quiet for exactly 4 seconds. You need to call the police, she says. But first, you need to secure everything. I know, I say. I'm already doing it. The securing takes the rest of that day. I organize everything into a documented file, photographs of the blender residue, the toxicology finding via Dr. Petrov's written preliminary report, screenshots of the insurance policy, the financial anomalies organized into a timeline, the loan default notice. I print physical copies and store them at my sister's house. I upload encrypted backups to 3 separate cloud accounts. I email the complete file to Patricia with the subject line, Personal Legal Matter, hold for my instruction. Then I go home and make dinner and tell Theo about my day, which I describe as uneventful. Over the next 3 days, I gather the rest. I find the other woman. I don't know who she is yet, only that she exists, but I know how to find her. I use the hotel record and the dates, cross-referenced with Theo's phone location data. Location sharing was something we set up years ago as a safety feature, which he has apparently forgotten about. His phone places him at a specific restaurant in Indianapolis on the Friday of that weekend before the hotel check-in. I find the restaurant, look at it on social media, and I search through tagged posts from that evening until I find a photo that includes two people in the background that I almost scroll past. One of them is my husband. The other is a woman with auburn hair and a laugh caught mid-frame. In the caption, someone has tagged the restaurant and added a string of emojis. One of her friends has commented below, when did you get to Indy? So jealous. She's replied with, surprise work trip with a friend. Her account is mostly public. Her name is Felicity. She is 28. She works at a medical spa in the northern suburbs of Cincinnati. She's the kind of beautiful that photographs well and that men like Theo, men who think in terms of acquisition, would consider worth the investment of $14,000 in untraceable cash and a weekend hotel bill. I look at her photos for a long time. She looks like someone who thinks she's in a love story. I don't hate her. I understand that Theo is very good at convincing people of things. On the fourth day after my birthday, I call a detective at the Cincinnati Police Department who I've worked with on 2 financial fraud referrals over the years. His name is Martinez and he is thorough and unsentimental, which is exactly what I need. I ask if I can meet with him in person, off the record, to share information related to an attempted poisoning. There's a pause on his end. Off the record today, he says. But I can't promise it stays that way. I know, I say. That's fine. We meet at a diner near the courthouse. I bring the complete file, printed and organized with the same structure I use for client fraud presentations. He reads through it without speaking. When he finishes, he looks at me across the table with an expression that is not quite sympathy and not quite admiration, and is somewhere between the two. You kept pretty cool through all of this, he says. I had to, I say. What do you want to happen? He asks. I want it done right, I say. I want it to hold up. Detective Martinez takes the file. He tells me to go home and act normally for 72 hours and to call him immediately as anything changes. He tells me not to consume anything my husband prepares. He tells me to be careful. I go home. I act normally. I drink water from sealed bottles and eat food I buy myself from a grocery store across town and bring in my own bags. Theo doesn't seem to notice. He is attentive and warm in a way that I now read as a man managing his investment, keeping things calm, keeping me unsuspecting, waiting for an opportunity to try again. On the second evening of the 72 hours, I find what I think might be the final piece. I am in the home office, ostensibly working, when I notice that Theo left his personal laptop open on the kitchen counter. He's in the shower. The screen hasn't locked yet. I don't touch the laptop. I don't have to. From where I'm standing in the doorway, I can read the email subject line in his open inbox. It says, timing. The sender is a name I don't recognize. But the preview text visible below the subject line shows 4 words before it cuts off. Once she's gone, I photograph it from the doorway with my phone. Timestamp, metadata, everything. Then I walk back to the office, sit down, and send the photograph to Patricia and to Detective Martinez. I do not look at the laptop again. I don't need to. Detective Martinez calls the next morning before I finish my coffee. He says they have enough. He says the toxicology report has been officially filed. He says there are additional findings he can't fully share yet, but that a warrant is being processed. He asks me if I have somewhere else to stay for a few days, somewhere Theo doesn't know about. Yes, I say. Go there, he says. Today. I pack a bag while Theo is at the gym, which he goes to every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 in the morning, with a consistency that has always seemed healthy and now seems, in retrospect, like the one true disciplined thing in his life. I take my documents, my laptop, and the things that cannot be replaced. I leave the rest. I drive to my sister's house. I call Patricia. I call my mother, who does not know the specifics, but who hears something in my voice and says, "You're coming here if you need to. You understand me?" and means it the way that only mothers can mean something. Theo is arrested that afternoon. Detective Martinez calls me as I'm sitting at my sister's kitchen table with a mug of coffee and my sister's old cat asleep on the chair beside me. He tells me calmly and without drama. He says Felicity was brought in for questioning and that additional evidence has been recovered from Theo's vehicle, including a second quantity of colchicine in a prescription bottle from the medical spa's dispensary, a bottle that should have been logged and destroyed 6 months ago. Felicity, it turns out, had access to the spa's pharmaceutical inventory as a licensed practical nurse. The bottle had her fingerprints on it. The timeline of its disappearance from inventory corresponds to the same week Theo took out the life insurance policy on my life. I think about how long this was being planned. I think about the birthday. I think about the grill sergeant apron. Theo's initial position with the detectives is, apparently, that I framed him, that I'm the one with pharmaceutical knowledge. I'm not, I'm an accountant, but he's trying, and that I staged the whole poisoning attempt to take his assets in a divorce. He tells them I've been volatile, unstable, emotionally controlling. He uses words that I recognize as the architecture of a specific kind of defense, the kind built to make a woman's credibility the thing on trial. It doesn't work as well when you bring a forensic accountant's documented evidence file to a detective meeting. It works even less when the detective has the blender residue, the insurance policy, the loan default, and a second bottle of the poison found in your car. Felicity breaks in the interrogation room after approximately 4 hours. I know this because Martinez tells me later that she was crying before they even finished reading her rights. She tells them Theo approached her 14 months ago at a pharmaceutical conference in Columbus, which is where they met, where he told her he was in an unhappy marriage to someone controlling and cold, where he was charming and told her she was the only person he'd felt understood by in years. He told her the plan, or his version of it, about 2 months before my birthday. He framed it as desperation. He owed money, his marriage was already over in every way that mattered. This was the only path forward for both of them. He'd made it sound like the logical conclusion to an impossible situation. He'd made it sound almost reasonable. She got the colchicine from the spa. She told herself it would look like a natural illness. She told herself lots of things, I imagine. I don't spend very much time thinking about Felicity's inner life. But I don't hate her either. I think she was another person Theo arranged to look a certain way. There is a moment, about a week after the arrest, that I keep returning to. I am in a conference room at my company with Patricia and 2 of my colleagues, going through the documentation related to the case and preparing for the civil proceedings around the insurance fraud, and someone says something about the life insurance policy, the $2 million, and asks, almost casually, what I plan to do with the marital assets once the divorce is finalized. I look at the table for a second. I'm going to buy a house, I say, somewhere with a yard. They move on to the next item. I stay with that thought a little longer. A yard, somewhere quiet. A garden maybe, though I've never gardened. A room I can use as an office. A kitchen where I can learn to cook things I actually like. A front porch where I can drink coffee in the morning without performing anything for anyone. The civil case takes 4 months. Theo's lawyer tries a few different angles, claiming I manipulated the financial documentation, claiming I entrapped him, claiming various things about our marriage that I recognize as fictions assembled from truth-adjacent parts. Each angle gets dismantled. I have 7 years of forensic accounting experience and a documented paper trail that a first-year law student could follow. I also have Felicity's testimony. Felicity, in exchange for cooperation with the prosecution, receives a reduced charge and probation. Her nursing license is suspended pending review. She calls me once, from a number I don't recognize, and when I answer and realize it's her, she says very quietly, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything." I believe she means it. I also think it doesn't change anything that happened. I know, I say. And then I hang up. Theo is convicted on charges of attempted murder and insurance fraud. He receives 18 years. His mother, who I had always found exhausting but essentially harmless, issues a public statement through a family spokesperson, which is a strange thing to have, a family spokesperson, calling me opportunistic and saying her son was manipulated by the woman he fell in love with. This is interesting because for 4 years she told Theo, just within my hearing range, that he could have done better. I don't respond to the statement. There's no version of that conversation worth having. The divorce is finalized on a Thursday in October. I drive home to my sister's house where I've been staying, and she has made a chicken pot pie and opened a bottle of wine that costs more than she would normally spend, and we sit at her kitchen table and eat dinner without talking about any of it, which is exactly what I need. What I do talk about over that dinner is what comes next. I've taken a leave of absence from work. The case drew some media attention. A forensic accountant uncovering her own husband's poisoning plot is the kind of story that writes itself, and the pressure became difficult. My firm has been generous, more generous than I expected, but I need time away from the work that defined my entire identity before I can figure out what comes after. I've been offered a book deal, which surprised me. A literary agent reached out through my attorney, someone who had read a long feature that ran in Cincinnati magazine about the case. The idea is a memoir. The idea is that the story of a woman who used her professional skills to uncover a crime against her own life might be something other people want to read. I haven't decided yet. I keep thinking about who I was before I was a forensic accountant, before I was a wife, before I was someone's plan for a payout. I was a girl who liked to figure things out, who liked puzzles, who looked at a complicated thing and wanted to understand the shape of it. I'm still that, underneath everything else. The house I buy is a 3-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood called Hyde Park, 12 minutes from my sister, 15 from my parents. It has a yard, like I said. It has a front porch. There is a small raised garden bed along the south wall where the previous owners grew tomatoes, and I decide I'll try tomatoes too in the spring, because why not? The first morning I wake up there, in a room with no furniture yet except a mattress and a lamp I bought at Target, I lie there and listen to the neighborhood. A lawnmower somewhere, a dog, a car starting up and pulling out, ordinary morning sounds belonging to no one in particular. I think about the smoothie sitting untouched in the sink. I think about the gray powder in the blender. I think about the small practice movement of a hand sliding a phone into a pocket. I think about all the data points I collected and organized and presented, the careful procedural logic of it, the way I turned something terrifying into something I could manage by making it into a problem with a solution. I am very good at that. And I am also, it turns out, someone who can fall apart in a bathroom for exactly 90 seconds and then come back out and make a plan. Both of those things will be useful going forward. I make coffee in the new kitchen. I stand at the window and drink it while the morning does what morning does, and I feel something I don't have a precise word for. Not happiness exactly, not relief exactly. Closer to the feeling of a very long calculation finally resolving, all those variables, all those unknowns, and then the answer clean and final on the page. I'm still here. I figured it out. What comes next is mine. I've thought a lot about the gray powder at the bottom of that blender. Such a small thing, barely visible. The kind of detail most people would rinse away without a second look. And I almost did. Not because I'm careless, but because I was standing in my own kitchen on my own birthday, and the last thing any person expects is to be standing at the edge of something that catastrophic, in a place that's supposed to feel safe. That's the part nobody talks about when they tell stories like mine. They talk about the strength, the composure, the evidence file, the conviction. They don't talk about the moment right before all of that when you're just a person holding a glass and something small and quiet in you says, "Wait," and you have to decide whether to listen. I've been thinking about what it means to actually listen to that voice. Not the dramatic version, not the movie version where the music swells and everything becomes clear. The real version, which is quieter and lonelier and requires you to be willing to be wrong. Because when I noticed the residue, I didn't know what it was. I only knew it didn't belong. I only knew it that a man who had never once in 4 years successfully cooked a meal had suddenly decided to make me a birthday smoothie with a supplement powder he'd researched. And those two facts, placed next to each other, didn't resolve. That discomfort, that small, stubborn refusal to let the math work out wrong, is what saved my life. Not cleverness, not courage in the cinematic sense. just the willingness to sit with an uncomfortable question long enough to find the answer. Theo counted on me not doing that. He counted on love being a reason to stop looking, and I think that's the cruelest part of what he did. Not just the planning and the poison and the insurance policy, but the way he used the ordinary tenderness of a marriage as cover. The apron, the birthday gesture, the careful staging of a morning designed to look like affection. He understood that people tend to stop examining the things they love, and he built his entire plan on that assumption. He was wrong about me. But I understand why he thought he wasn't. There's something I've come to believe about the way choices accumulate, not in any mystical sense, just in the observable, practical sense of watching how things unfold. Theo made a series of decisions over 8 months. The loan he hid, the woman he deceived alongside me, the bottle he asked her to take from a dispensary, the policy with my name on it, and each one required the next. Each small dishonesty created the conditions that made the next one feel necessary. That's how it works. Not a sudden turn into darkness, but a slow drift, one compromise at a time, until you're somewhere you never could have imagined standing at the beginning. And the same is true in the other direction. I made a decision to notice, then a decision to preserve the sample, then a decision to call my sister before I called anyone else, because I needed to be believed by someone who loved me before I could go anywhere near a system that might not. Each small act of clarity made the next one possible. Felicity was somewhere in the middle of all of it, making her own accumulation of choices and ending up in a place I don't think she ever pictured either. I'm not the person to judge what happens to her from here, but I think about the moment she decided to trust Theo's version of my marriage over any evidence she might have gathered herself. I think about what it costs to stop asking questions about the people we choose to believe in. The house in Hyde Park is quiet in the mornings. I've started growing tomatoes. I'm not particularly good at it yet, but I'm learning, which turns out to be enough. I'm still here. I kept looking. That's the whole story, really.